I've always considered myself a rational guy, you know? The kind who weighs the pros and cons before making a decision. But there's something about loneliness that can make the sharpest mind hazy. That's how I found myself swiping through a dating app one dreary Thursday night. Her name was Eliza. From the moment her profile popped up, it felt like a cosmic joke. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. Her interests lined up eerily with mine. Obscure bands I loved, books I adored, even the same penchant for spicy Thai food. It was like someone had crafted her profile from the recesses of my mind. Our chats were effortless, full of laughter and shared secrets. For weeks, it felt like I was getting to know someone who really got me. We planned to meet, a casual coffee date. But as the day approached, Eliza's messages became sparse. Hours before we were supposed to meet, she texted. "Family emergency," she said, apologizing profusely. I understood. Life happens. We rescheduled for the following week. The second attempt was no different. This time, it was a work crisis. I started to feel the prickles of doubt, but her apologies seemed so sincere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was real. We rescheduled yet again. Finally, the day came. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. I arrived early, nerves bundled tightly in my stomach. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last. Just as I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. It was Eliza, but not with the message I expected. She was nearby, she said, but there had been a change of plans. Something about her feeling anxious in crowded places. She suggested a quiet spot she knew, not too far, an open field just outside town. It was secluded, peaceful, she assured me. My gut churned with a cocktail of excitement and unease, but the part of me that had spent weeks building a connection with her won over. I texted back, agreeing to meet her there. The drive was a blur, my mind racing with 1,000 scenarios. As I pulled up to the field, the sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. The field was empty, save for the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. I waited, each minute stretching into an eternity. The twilight deepened, painting the field in hues of purple and gray. The chirping of crickets filled the silence, their song both comforting and eerie. My phone remained stubbornly silent. Doubt gnawed at me, a growing realization that something was off. Then I heard it, the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see Eliza, but the field was still empty. My skin prickled with a sudden chill, the kind that creeps up your spine when you realize you're not alone. I called out, my voice betraying a hint of fear, but there was no answer. Just the rustling of the grass, as if something or someone was moving just out of sight. As the darkness settled in, the field transformed. What had seemed like a peaceful spot now felt like a stage set for something sinister. I thought about Eliza, about the connection we'd shared, and how foolish I'd been to believe in it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't been talking to a potential soulmate. I'd been lured here, to this isolated place, by someone, or something, with intentions far from romantic. That's when the true fear set in, a cold, gripping terror that I wasn't alone in this field. And whatever was out there with me wasn't here for a date. I reached for my phone, the screen's glow a small comfort in the enveloping night. No new messages, no missed calls. Just the last message from Eliza, guiding me to this desolate place. I felt a surge of anger, at her, at myself. How could I have been so gullible? To think that love, or whatever I thought I was chasing, could be found like this. The sound came again, closer this time. A shuffling, like footsteps dragging through the grass. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice stronger than I felt. No reply, just the whispering of the wind. I thought about running, but where would I go? The field was vast, and in the darkness, every direction seemed the same. I remembered my car, parked at the edge of the field, my only real chance of escape. Slowly, I began to back towards it, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. That's when I saw it, A shadow, distinct against the moonlit grass. It was moving not towards me, but parallel, as if circling. Panic surged through me, raw and primal. I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. I broke into a run, my feet pounding against the ground. The car seemed impossibly far, a small beacon in the sea of darkness. Behind me, the sound of pursuit, quick, heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. I didn't dare look back, fear propelling me forward. Breathless, I reached the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut. I locked the doors, my heart slamming against my ribs. I started the engine, the sound shattering the oppressive silence. I didn't wait to see who or what was chasing me. I drove out of there, the tires screeching against the dirt road. The field receded in the rearview mirror, but the terror clung to me, a cold, unyielding grip. As I drove, my mind raced with questions. Who had set this trap? Was it really Eliza, or someone else using her identity? The thought that this could have been a meticulously planned robbery, or something even worse, chilled me to the bone. I realized then how lucky I was to escape, to not become a headline in the morning news. The experience shattered my trust, leaving me with a deep-seated paranoia that lingered long after that night. I thought about reporting it to the police, but what would I say? That I was lured to a field by a date that never existed. It sounded absurd, even to my own ears. The drive home was a blur, my mind numb with shock and fear. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that shadowy figure following me. But there was nothing, just the empty road stretching out behind me. When I finally reached home, I locked the door and collapsed against it, the adrenaline leaving my body in a rush. I was safe, but the feeling of violation, of being preyed upon, was overwhelming. I knew then that this experience would haunt me, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows of our digital world. Back in my house, the familiar walls offered a semblance of safety, a refuge from the night's terror. I sat there, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The idea of calling the police crossed my mind, but something held me back. I needed time to process, to understand what had just happened. Maybe I was in denial, thinking it was all just a bad dream that I'd wake up from. As the night deepened, a sense of unease crept over me. I tried to distract myself, to think of anything other than the field and the shadowy figure. But it was futile. The fear had rooted itself deep inside me. I decided to peek through the window, seeking reassurance in the quiet suburban street. That's when I noticed it. A car parked across the street, its engine running. It was odd, out of place in our usually serene neighborhood. A shiver ran down my spine as I strained my eyes to see the driver, but the darkness and distance obscured any details. Then, suddenly, a face turned towards my house. It was covered in darkness, features indiscernible, but it felt like they were looking right at me. My heart skipped a beat. Was this just a coincidence, or something more sinister? I retreated from the window, my mind racing. Could they have followed me? The thought was paralyzing. I double-checked the locks on the doors, the windows, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. But the sense of being watched, hunted, lingered. It was then that I heard it. The unmistakable sound of breaking glass from the back of the house. My heart pounded in my chest. They were here. This wasn't just a robbery. It was personal. I scrambled to find something to defend myself with, settling on a heavy flashlight. Creeping towards the sound, I could hear muffled movements, the soft tread of footsteps inside my own home. Adrenaline surged through me, a mix of fear and a primal instinct to protect myself. As I rounded the corner into the kitchen, I came face to face with one of the intruders. He was larger than me, a menacing figure clad in dark clothing. In his hand, he held a crowbar. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a grunt, he lunged at me. The scuffle was chaotic, a blur of movement and desperation. I swung the flashlight with all my might, connecting with his arm, sending the crowbar clattering to the floor. We grappled, each trying to overpower the other. I was fighting for my life, every ounce of my being focused on surviving this nightmare. Suddenly, the intruder stumbled, tripping over a kitchen chair. Seizing the opportunity, I made a run for it, darting out of the house through the front door. I didn't look back, didn't stop to see if I was being followed. I just ran as fast and as far as my legs would carry me. It wasn't until I was several blocks away, panting and disheveled, that I allowed myself to stop. I realized then that I had to call the police. This was no longer about a strange encounter in a field. It was an attack, a violation of my own home. When the police arrived, they were quick to act, searching my house and the surrounding area. But the intruders were gone, vanished into the night. The officers took my statement, their expressions a mix of concern and skepticism. They mentioned a similar report from a few weeks back, but there were no leads, no suspects. In the aftermath, I couldn't bear the thought of staying in my house, knowing that those who had attacked me knew where I lived. I packed a bag and went to stay with my parents. The sense of security I once felt in my home, in my neighborhood, had been shattered. I was considering moving, starting fresh somewhere else, somewhere where the shadows of that night couldn't reach me. A week or two went by, and I made the decision to officially move out of my old house. As I packed my belongings, sifting through memories of a life that now seems so distant, I realized this was more than just a physical move. It was a step towards healing, towards reclaiming the narrative of my life. The scars would remain, both physical and emotional, but they would not control me. I left behind not just a house, but a chapter of my life marked by fear and vulnerability. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also the possibility of new beginnings, of building a life untainted by the shadows of that fateful night. In the end, I understood that while we cannot always control the events that unfold in our lives, we can choose how we respond to them. The darkness had touched my life, but it would not extinguish my light. I would move forward, cautiously, but with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that even in our most vulnerable moments, we possess the strength to persevere and to start anew.